I want to do next is to show you how to make a new variable. So what we have in our data file here is two different numeric scores for each participant. We have their 1105 score and their 1104 score. Let's say that we wanted to make a new variable which was the average of these two things. So this is quite commonly something that you would want to do when you are performing any kind of stats analyses yourself, or you're playing around with data or wanting to summarize data. Often you do a lot of what's called this data management or data manipulation, where you need to make new variables, re-express existing variables, kind of change the way that they are, or change the categories, or group categories together, or split categories apart, or something like that. So what I'm going to show you now is how to make a new variable, and that new variable is going to be the average of these two existing scores. So the average of 1105 and 1104 is going to be what this new variable is. And so I'm going to show you how to do it through the command box down the bottom here, and then I'm going to show you how to do the exact same thing by using the menu system. So down the bottom here, I'm going to type the word egen. Egen stands for extended generate. So generate means make a new variable. There's two different versions of the generate command. The extended generate command, which is what this one is, egen, just has a bit more functionality than the normal generate command. So I'm going to type in egen, which is our command name, and then I'm going to call my new variable something. So my new variable is going to be called SNG. And then what I'm going to type is a mathematical operation. So this is just the same kind of thing as what you would do in Microsoft Excel if you were using formulas to make new variables. So egen SNG equals, and I'm going to type the word row mean, and row mean just means it's going to average across, to mean across a row of data, and it'll do whichever variables, it'll average across or mean across whichever variables I'm specifying. So row mean, open parentheses, and that's going to be PSYU1104 and then PSYU1105. Note that the order of these two variables doesn't matter. So in our data file, 1105 comes before 1104. That doesn't matter at all. I can put them in whatever order I want. So I'm going to type that, egen SNG equals row mean PSYU1104, PSYU1105, and then hit enter. Haven't got any error messages, which is a good thing. And then what I can see here is that I've got a new variable in my variables list here, which is SNG. And if I open up my data editor, I've got a new variable here, SNG, which is literally the average, the mean of 1104 and 1105 scores. So what we've done now is to make a new variable. That new variable is the mean, the average of our two existing numeric variables. And I'm going to show you how to do that through the menu system if you wanted to do that instead. So you're going to go up to the data menu. You're going to go down to create or change data, and then create new variable extended. This is the egen, the extended generate command. This first box here is the name of the new variable. So the variable that we just made was SNG. I'm going to do the same thing again, but I can't call it the same variable because every variable has to have a unique name in your data file. So I can't call my new variable SNG because we already have a variable that exists called SNG. So I'm going to call it SNG2. In this drop down here, this is a list of a whole lot of commands that you can do, different functions that you can use within the extended generate command. The one that we're doing is row mean, but you can see there's heaps of other different sorts of ones. And then over to the right hand side, we have a list of the variables in our data file. And by selecting the variables from the drop down, that's specifying which variables are going to be meaned, are going to be averaged in order to make this new variable. And then we go OK. And you can see it's done the same thing in that we've got another new variable, SNG2. If I open up our data editor, it has the exact same scores as what SNG does. So again, you wouldn't need to do this twice. I'm just showing you twice to be able to demonstrate it both through the written syntax and through the menu system. What you can see here, for those of you that are particularly good at noticing these things, is that there's actually one subtle difference between the command that we wrote out ourselves and the command that Stata pasted here, that Stata wrote out from doing it through the menu system. And that's this word float. And float is setting the type of variable that's being created. You might have seen that in the menu when we were just in the menu before. the reason that we didn't need to actually write that ourselves when we wrote out the syntax up here is because it's a float variable that's going to be created by default. So there's often default settings that you actually don't need to specify when you're writing out commands yourself. That will just happen. But if you look at the syntax that's been written out after you've done something through the menu system, sometimes there's additional words or additional options that are included there just kind of for the completeness of the command that you've made. What I'm going to do now is to show you how to put a variable label to the existing SNG variable. So you can see that the variables that came with the data file when we opened it, they all have variable labels associated with them. So these are the variable names. Each variable also has a label. The new variables that we create don't create labels like automatically. It doesn't happen automatically when you create a new variable, but you can create it yourself using the label variable command. Every variable doesn't have to have a label, so each variable has to have a name, but it doesn't have to have a label. Labels are optional, but they are usually a good idea. Partly it's just sort of good practice to have a complete data set, which means labeling all your variables. And labels can be really useful when you have a big data set with a lot of different kinds of variables in order to give you more information about what each variable is. So it's kind of, you can see that it's not super necessary in this very small data file, but when you do start getting bigger data files, using bigger data files, it's really useful to have labels with your variables that just gives you a bit more information about where this variable came from and what it is. So what we're going to do now is to give our variable SNG a name. So the command to do that is label variable. And then we need the name of the variable, so SNG. And then in inverted commas, you put the text of the label. So remember that labels can have spaces, they can have non-alphanumeric characters, they can have sort of anything that you want in them, whereas variable names have rules about what they have to be, and they have to be relatively short and succinct. But variable label for SNG, I'm going to put that it's the average for PSYU1104, PSYU1105. Close off the inverted commas and then hit enter. And you can see, since we ran that, now over on the right hand side here, let me move that, make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. That variable SNG now has a label. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to delete a variable. So deleting variables are really easy. It's called the drop command. So if I type drop and then I type in the name of this variable, remember this was the superfluous second SNG variable. So I type in SNG2, and once I hit enter, it's going to disappear from the list here. Okay. The other way of deleting variables, if you're in your data editor in the edit menu, is to right click on the top of the variable and go down to data and go drop selected data, and that's going to delete the variable.